In this episode, I'm going to show you and talk about how I begin an oil painting. Hey there, welcome to part 2 of my mini-series on working with oil paints. In case you missed part 1, you can catch up by clicking the link right here or find it in the description below. To start, I've chosen to work with the dark tones, creating a mix of ultramarine blue and burnt sienna. If needed, I can tweak these dark tones by adding a touch of titanium white to the mix. So I have a basic colour palette ready that will get modified throughout the painting, and I'm not being exact with the colours I see in the reference. The initial step in oil painting always feels a bit like a puzzle to me. It does take me a minute or two to find my feet and work out what's going on. While I typically opt for larger brushes, this painting is relatively small, so I'm sticking to medium-sized ones. My cool colours are mixes of ultramarine blue, burnt sienna, quinacridone magenta and titanium white, and my warm tones are mixed with cadmium red, yellow ochre, burnt sienna and titanium white. To maintain a clean transition between cool and warm tones, I use two main brushes. I make sure to clean them between applications. I don't linger in one spot for too long. I prefer to work on the painting as a whole. It's almost like a dance, and I find this process enjoyable as it allows me to explore and experiment. This early stage isn't about too much blending or detailing. It's all about the blocking layer, where I'm primarily focusing on establishing my tones, finding that balance between warm and cool. Considering the wooden surface I'm working on, I'm generous with my use of paint to ensure it adheres effectively. For this piece, I'm not keeping the colours too muted. I intend to save my lightest and darkest tones for the final layer, but building up layers with as much information regarding colour and values as possible is essential. This strategy will make the next painting session a lot smoother. But let's not forget, we're working with oil paints, and that can lead to wet into wet situations. We need to be cautious not to overblend, particularly when working with cool and warm colours, to avoid ending up with a muddy painting. Now let's talk about wet into wet techniques. I must say I truly enjoy manipulating that wet paint. Here I'm making some subtle adjustments using a smaller brush, which is something I absolutely love doing. If I need to make adjustments to an area on top of the wet paint, I ensure that the new paint I'm applying is of thicker consistency. This approach minimises the risk of blending or muddying the existing colours, effective when adding subtle highlights or enhancing the saturation of a specific colour. Now onto the backgrounds. I want to achieve a smooth gradient of green. To achieve this, I've mixed ultramarine blue and cadmium yellow with a touch of sap green, and I begin lightening the mix with titanium white. For the dark green, I add the same mix but without titanium white, giving me a similar tone to the reference picture. Contrast is something I enjoy playing with, so the background might have darker portions against a lighter part of the subject, like you can see on top of the ears. It's also worth noting that you can create this contrast using colour harmony. Occasionally I pick up wet sections of the green to add some texture to that brush. At this stage I'm uncertain whether I'll include the flowers in this piece. I might decide to add them, but I'd likely add my own creative touch to the painting. Sometimes it's hard to think about what a painting is going to look like or how you see it in your mind. And I get this quite often because I don't always plan what I'm going to paint. I mean, I have an idea of what I'm going to paint, of course, but how it looks, I mean, there's so many sort of directions that the painting can go into. You might have an idea of how it's going to look, and then suddenly it doesn't look like that because you've tried something new and experimented. But I guess that will probably come in the next painting session. Who knows what the final version will look like? That's it for part 2. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and enable notifications to stay updated as we continue this journey. See you in part 3.